Imagine for a second just taking a single tiny drop of blood from your fingertip.
Right, just one microscopic prick.
Exactly. And from that single drop, an extraordinary machine could instantly run 30 complex medical tests.
Which is, I mean, it sounds like science fiction.
It really does. We're talking about scanning for cholesterol, cancer markers, infections, all in a matter of minutes.
No giant needles.
Yeah, no intimidating vials, no waiting anxiously for days while a lab processes your sample. It would fundamentally change human history, right? It would democratize healthcare.
This is an incredibly alluring idea.
It was so powerful and so alluring that it was valued at over $9 billion.
Wow, $9 billion.
$9 billion. And it had the backing of U.S. senators, global billionaires, brilliant military generals. And, well, it was all a complete, meticulously fabricated lie.
It is the absolute definition of a Silicon Valley fairy tale that just devolved in real time into a high-stakes medical nightmare.
It really is.
It's a story about the suspension of disbelief on a catastrophic scale.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today's deep dive is utilizing a truly comprehensive historical overview. We're looking directly at the public record, specifically the extensive historical accounts from Wikipedia of a company called Theranos.
Right.
And our mission today is to deconstruct exactly how a 19-year-old college dropout managed to convince the world's most powerful, legally savvy, and ruthlessly successful people to value her startup at over $9 billion.
Without a single piece of proof.
Exactly. She did it without publishing a single peer-reviewed medical paper to prove her technology actually worked.
What's fascinating here is that, when you strip away the glamour and the magazine covers, it's a staggering reality to confront.
It really is.
It forces us to ask how the normal defense mechanisms of business and science just completely failed.
They totally failed. And, if you are listening to this right now, you might be wondering, well, why should you care?
Right. Maybe you aren't a tech CEO.
Exactly. Maybe you aren't a venture capitalist looking for the next unicorn. But here's the undeniable thing. You, like every other person on this planet, are a consumer of healthcare.
Absolutely.
You're a consumer of technology. You walk into pharmacies, you get blood drawn, you trust the medical results your doctor hands you. So this story is an absolute masterclass in how easily the human desire for a better way, that deep-seated hope we all have for medical miracles, how that can be weaponized against our own critical thinking.
Yeah, and we cannot look at this merely as a financial scam.
Right.
I mean, yes, hundreds of millions of dollars evaporated into thin air. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it was a fundamental systemic breakdown of due diligence across multiple pillars of our society.
Everyone dropped the ball.
Everyone. The journalism industry, the federal government, the private retail sector, the medical advisory space, they all collectively failed to ask the right questions at the right time.
They just wanted the story to be true so badly.
Exactly. They stopped demanding the data.
Well, we have to start at the absolute beginning to really understand how a deception of this magnitude takes root. Because, you don't just wake up one day and decide to defraud the world.
No, it usually starts with a good intention.
Right, a seemingly noble idea. Making blood tests cheaper, making them accessible to people who are terrified of needles. I mean, it's a goal anyone would inherently support.
Sure.
But that noble seed became the foundation of a massive fraud. So let's wind the clock back to the origin. Take us back to 2003.
So in 2003, we are looking at Elizabeth Holmes. She is an undergraduate student at Stanford University.
Okay.
And initially, she isn't even looking at blood testing in the way we eventually come to know it. She had this initial conceptual idea to develop a wearable patch for drug delivery.
Wait, a patch? Like a nicotine patch?
Conceptually similar in its application, yeah.
Yeah.
But her vision was that this patch could dynamically adjust the dosage of a drug being delivered into a patient's system.
Oh, wow.
While simultaneously monitoring variables in the patient's blood and notifying doctors of those changes in real time.
So a smart patch that tests your blood and physically administers your medicine at the exact same time.
Right.
I mean, it sounds like science fiction.
It does. And from that initial patch concept, her thinking evolved. She started developing this idea of lab-on-a-chip technology, shifting her focus specifically toward blood tests.
Okay.
The core vision was incredibly compelling. Start a company that would make clinical tests cheaper, significantly more convenient, and directly accessible to everyday consumers without needing to go through a labyrinth of doctors and traditional laboratories.
Right, cutting out the middleman.
Exactly. So, propelled by this vision, she makes the monumental decision. She drops out of Stanford.
At 19.
She's just 19 years old.
Huh.
And to fund the earliest stages of this nascent company, she uses the education trust fund that her parents had carefully set aside for her college tuition.
Wait, let me just pause right there because I'm reading through the source material and I really want to push back on the way this is often framed.
How so?
Well, it's framed as just a naive college kid trying to do good, right? Yeah. But there's a branding detail in the text that I think is utterly brilliant, but also deeply inherently manipulative.
Oh, you mean the name change?
Yes.
Yeah.
The company wasn't originally called Theranos, was it?
No, it was incorporated in 2003 under the name Real-Time Cures.
Real-Time Cures. But Holmes didn't keep that name. She changed it to Theranos, which the source notes is a linguistic mashup of the words therapy and diagnosis.
Right.
Now, here's the kicker. The text explicitly notes that she changed the name because she felt that people were, and I quote, skeptical of the word cure.
Yeah, that's a very telling detail.
I mean, I have to ask you, does this feel like the very first sign of a marketer who fundamentally understands how to dodge scientific scrutiny?
That absolutely does.
Like, she intrinsically knew that claiming a cure invites regulators and scientists to ask for definitive proof. But therapy and diagnosis.
Those are ongoing processes.
Right. They sound incredibly official, but they are infinitely more vague. You can't be sued for failing to deliver a cure if you only promised a diagnosis.
It's an incredibly astute observation, and it highlights a psychological sophistication that is, well, remarkable for a 19-year-old.
It really is.
Changing the corporate identity from a definitive absolute outcome, a cure, to a diagnostic process subtly but profoundly shifts the burden of proof.
Yeah.
It softens the medical claim while simultaneously maintaining the grand illusion of immense medical authority. It's a very calculated pivot.
Because if you promise a cure, people want to see the cured patients.
Exactly. The immediate question is, where's the clinical trial proving nobody is sick anymore?
Right.
If you promise a diagnosis, you are simply providing data. It's a much lower bar for entry in the minds of early investors.
And it wasn't just the name that was a calculated illusion. The physical technology they were promising, the actual hardware, it's almost hard to wrap your head around how small they claimed it was.
The nanotainer.
Yes, let's talk about the physical containers. The nanotainer.
The nanotainer was the crown jewel of Theranos' proprietary blood collection system. And when we use the word small, we mean microscopic by the standards of traditional medical pathology.
Like how small?
According to their specifications, it was precisely 12.9 millimeters in height.
I need everyone listening to visualize that. 12.9 millimeters. That is basically half an inch.
Yeah.
It's the size of a pill. It's the size of the tip of your pinky finger.
About half an inch tall. And it was custom designed to hold just a couple of minuscule drops of blood, which would be collected via a simple, relatively painless finger prick.
And then what?
This tiny half-inch sample was then supposed to be transferred into their proprietary analysis machine, which they dubbed the Edison.
The Edison. Okay, I have an analogy here that I think helps frame what they were actually selling.
Go ahead.
Based on what they claimed this machine could do, it sounds to me like they weren't pitching a medical device. They were pitching the iPhone of healthcare.
That is a very apt comparison.
Like it was this sleek, magical, self-contained black box that promised to do a million incredibly complex things flawlessly, all behind a minimalist exterior.
Right.
Because the Edison wasn't just a centrifuge or a basic testing unit, right? It was supposed to be a smart, interconnected device.
That's a highly accurate analogy. The actual patent filed for the Edison described a point-of-care system that was supposed to communicate directly with the internet.
Okay, so it's online.
Yes, the workflow is supposed to go like this. The machine receives the nanotainer. It then connects online to receive specific instructions for which exact blood test to run on that unique sample.
Wow.
Once the internal mechanisms completed the test, it would securely communicate the results back through the internet.
Okay, so it's an Internet of Things device. It's a connected laboratory. That alone is ambitious.
But it goes much further than just sending an email with your cholesterol levels.
What else did it do?
According to the claims, those results would then be automatically, algorithmically compared to vast databases of medical data available on the internet.
Oh, wow.
And based on that real-time comparison, the Edison was supposed to be capable of autonomously running targeted supplementary blood tests right there on the spot.
Wait, autonomously?
Yes, to verify anomalies or check for secondary conditions without a doctor having to order a second round of tests.
Wait, I'm confused. From the same tiny half-inch tube of blood,
Yes.
they are claiming the machine can run an initial test, check the internet, decide it needs to run a different test, and do it all from a sample the size of a raindrop.
From that exact same couple of drops, yes.
How is that biologically possible? I mean, once you run a chemical test on a drop of blood, don't you destroy or alter that blood? You can't reuse it, right?
You're exactly right. And this brings us precisely to one of the most glaring, undeniable red flags of the entire Theranos saga.
Okay.
And the incredible thing is, this red flag wasn't hidden in a secret vault. It was sitting right there, publicly available, in the text of the patent itself.
Lay it on me. What did the patent say?
If we look at the actual documentation of one of the core patents for the Edison machine, it was entirely fundamentally contradictory on the most basic scientific question.
Which is?
How much blood did the machine actually require to conduct these tests?
Okay.
In one section of the document, the patent explicitly claimed the sample needed to consist of about 10 drops of blood.
Okay. 10 drops. Still very small, but a tangible amount.
Right. But in another section of the exact same patent, it claimed the Edison would need less than 1 drop of blood.
Less than 1 drop versus 10 drops.
Yes.
That is not a small discrepancy.
Yeah.
That is a difference of 1,000%.
Massive.
That's like an automotive engineer filing a patent for a car and saying, well, this vehicle requires either 1 gallon of gas to drive across the country or 10 gallons. We aren't really sure.
It is a massive disqualifying discrepancy, and we need to delve into why this matters so much in biological sciences.
Please do, because I'm lost on the chemistry here.
When you are dealing with fluid dynamics and diagnostic testing, the volume of the sample dictates the concentration of whatever analyte you are looking for.
Explain analyte for me.
An analyte is simply the substance whose chemical constituents are being identified and measured.
Yeah.
It could be a glucose molecule, a specific protein indicating heart disease, or a viral load.
Got it.
Imagine you have a cup of coffee, and you dissolve exactly 1 single grain of sugar into it.
Okay, 1 grain.
If you take a massive gulp of that coffee, you have a high probability of ingesting that grain of sugar and tasting the sweetness.
Sure.
But if you only take a microscopic drop of that coffee on the very tip of a needle, you will likely miss that single grain of sugar entirely, even though it technically exists in the cup.
Oh, wow. That makes perfect sense.
Right.
So if you were looking for a rare cancer marker in a patient's bloodstream and you only take half a drop of blood, that marker might literally just not be in that specific drop.
Exactly.
Even if the patient has cancer.
Exactly. The smaller the volume of blood, the harder it is to find the analyte.
Wow.
It requires exponentially more sensitive, complex, and delicate testing mechanisms.
Right.
So if your core proprietary technology, the very foundation of your multi-billion-dollar company, cannot consistently define in its own patent whether it needs 10 drops or a fraction of 1 drop.
That's a problem.
That lack of precision isn't just a typo. It is a fundamental, glaring scientific warning sign.
Yeah.
It suggests to any trained pathologist that the technology hasn't actually been standardized, hasn't been reliably tested, or perhaps hasn't even been fully built.
And despite all of that, despite the magical thinking and the contradictory patents, they have the audacity to name it the Edison.
Yes, the Edison.
The source material notes that Holmes reportedly chose the name based on a very famous quote by Thomas Edison. Have you heard this one?
I have.
It's, "I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work."
There's a remarkably dark, almost poetic irony there.
I mean, seriously.
Edison's quote implies a journey of rigorous scientific method. It implies that after 10,000 documented, understood failures, you finally find the one distinct way that does work.
Right. And that's the invention.
Exactly. What Theranos effectively did was find 10,000 ways that didn't work, and rather than finding the one that did, they simply put one of the failures inside a sleek black box and sold it to the world anyway.
So we have a company with contradictory patents. We have a machine that mathematically, biologically, and conceptually doesn't make sense on paper.
None at all.
We have absolutely zero peer-reviewed science published in any medical journal anywhere on Earth.
Zero.
How does a company with that completely hollow profile achieve a $9 billion valuation?
That is the big question.
Because clearly, investors aren't stupid. They don't just hand over billions of dollars because you quote Thomas Edison.
They don't. But they will hand over billions of dollars if you build an impenetrable fortress of borrowed credibility.
Yes. This is where the story shifts from a naive startup into a masterclass of corporate manipulation. If you don't have the science to prove your product works, you go out and get the absolute biggest, most intimidating names in the world to stand in front of your company.
That'll build a wall.
You build a wall of reputation so high and so blinding that nobody dares to question the science. And it starts with the board of directors.
In July 2011, Elizabeth Holmes was introduced to former U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz,
Okay, a massive name.
a titan of American diplomacy and government. He was so taken by her vision that he joined the Theranos board of directors that very month.
Just like that.
And over the next 3 years, Schultz used his vast network to help bring in an astonishing, almost incomprehensible roster of outside directors. We are talking about what was widely referred to as an all-star board.
Let's actually walk through this list because it is genuinely unbelievable.
Before.
You have William Perry, former U.S. Secretary of Defense.
Right.
You have Henry Kissinger, former U.S. Secretary of State.
Henry Kissinger.
Sam Nunn, a highly influential former U.S. Senator. Bill Frist, another former U.S. Senator who happened to also be a heart transplant surgeon.
Okay, one medical guy.
One medical guy. Then you have Gary Roughead, a retired admiral in the United States Navy. Jim Mattis, a highly respected general in the Marine Corps who would later go on to become Secretary of Defense.
General Mattis.
Richard Kovacevic, the former chairman and CEO of Wells Fargo. And Riley P. Bechtel, the chairman of the massive engineering firm Bechtel Group.
It is a board of directors that looks like it was assembled to manage a global geopolitical crisis, not a healthcare startup in Silicon Valley.
Okay, I have to jump in here with another analogy.
Greece.
Because when you hear that list of names, your immediate human reaction is, wow, those are incredibly serious, brilliant, powerful people. If they trust this company, it must be legitimate. But if you actually look at what Theranos was trying to do, inventing a revolutionary chemical, biological, and microfluidic blood testing device, hiring that specific board is like hiring a panel of Michelin star chefs to evaluate the safety, thermodynamics, and aerodynamics of a newly invented commercial jet engine.
That analogy perfectly captures the severe disconnect at the heart of Theranos' corporate governance.
Like, sure, they are world-class at what they do. A Michelin star chef is a genius with ingredients and flavor profiles, but what does a chef know about the tensile strength of an airplane wing?
Absolutely nothing.
What does a retired Navy admiral or a former Secretary of State know about lab-on-a-chip microfluidics or the chemical reagents required to test for syphilis?
Right.
It's overwhelmingly impressive on a letterhead, but it is completely fundamentally useless for the actual vital task of scientific and medical oversight.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to deeply analyze the psychology of a board like this.
Okay, bring that down for me.
Why was it so advantageous for a fraudulent company? As many critics rightfully pointed out later, this board consisted almost entirely of older men with extensive diplomatic, intelligence, or military backgrounds.
Yeah, lots of military and government.
And what do the military and the intelligence communities excel at above all else?
I don't know, strategy.
Compartmentalization.
Oh.
Absolute secrecy. The handling of classified information strictly on a need-to-know basis.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
It's a crucial component of the deception. When Holmes creates a deeply secretive, almost paranoid corporate culture at Theranos, a culture where different scientific departments aren't allowed to talk to each other.
Which they did.
Which they did, where employees are heavily siloed, where outsiders and even investors aren't allowed to look inside the Edison machines.
Right.
These specific board members wouldn't necessarily view that as a red flag.
Because they're used to it.
Exactly. To a former Secretary of Defense or a four-star military general, intense, stifling secrecy doesn't look like an attempt to hide a fraud.
It looks like national security.
It looks like standard operating procedure for protecting highly valuable proprietary intelligence.
That makes so much sense.
They were culturally conditioned to accept secrecy as a virtue. They were the perfect, unwitting shield for a company that had everything to hide.
And with that massive, impenetrable shield of global diplomats in place, the corporate mega partnerships started rolling in.
Oh, yeah.
Because if Henry Kissinger and George Shultz are looking at the books and saying this company is sound, why wouldn't a national supermarket chain believe them?
Precisely. The halo effect of that board was incredibly lucrative.
Give me some numbers.
In 2012, Safeway, a massive grocery store chain, invested $350 million.
$350 million.
And this wasn't just a quiet venture capital investment. This was money spent to physically retrofit 800 of their retail locations.
Wow.
With custom-built clinics that were supposed to offer these revolutionary in-store Theranos blood tests.
Stop and think about the logistics of that for a second. $350 million. They aren't just writing a check. They are sending construction crews into 800 supermarkets.
Yes.
They are knocking down walls, installing plumbing, designing waiting areas, changing their floor plans, training staff.
It's a massive physical undertaking.
That is a massive, incredibly disruptive physical commitment. And they did all of that for a technology that didn't exist.
It shows the sheer power of corporate FOMO, the fear of missing out. Safeway wanted to be the first to offer this miracle technology.
Well, they weren't alone.
No, they weren't alone. In 2013, Theranos struck a massive partnership with Walgreens, the pharmacy giant,
Right, Walgreens.
to actually put blood testing clinics in over 40 of their store locations.
Okay.
And to bolster all of this rapid retail expansion, Theranos projected the illusion of massive backing from the most rigorous entities in medicine.
Yeah.
Big Pharma.
Right, the pharmaceutical companies. Because if you can convince people that pharmaceutical giants are using your tech, it implies that the most rigorous scientists in the world have vetted it.
Exactly.
Right.
Theranos publicly claimed that their revolutionary blood tests were currently being used on real patients in actual drug trials for pharmaceutical titans like GlaxoSmithKline and Pfizer.
Claimed being the operative word there.
Yes.
Because I'm looking at the timeline and the sources, and both of those companies, GlaxoSmithKline and Pfizer, later came out in October 2015 and flat out, unequivocally stated they had absolutely no active projects with Theranos whatsoever.
None.
Theranos just made it up.
It was a complete illusion of validation. But for a critical window of time, that illusion worked spectacularly well.
Yeah, it brought in the money.
It drove an unprecedented investment surge. By 2014, Theranos had raised over $400 million in funding.
Jeez.
This is what propelled them to that peak mythical valuation of $9 to $10 billion in the 2013 to 2014 timeframe.
And the people putting this money in weren't just, standard Silicon Valley venture capitalists who are used to losing money on risky apps.
No, these were massive players.
We are talking about some of the wealthiest, most established legacy families on the planet. The Walton family, the founders of Walmart, put in $150 million.
Incredible.
Media mogul Rupert Murdoch personally invested $121 million. Betsy DeVos and her family put in $100 million.
And to understand how these sophisticated billionaires could be so easily parted with hundreds of millions of dollars, it's crucial to understand the broader macroeconomic environment that allowed this to happen.
Okay, set the scene for me.
Between the years 2004 and 2016, the global financial landscape fundamentally shifted. The amount of available cash that investors had given to private equity and venture capital firms to deploy grew exponentially.
How much are we talking?
From $400 billion to an astonishing $1.5 trillion.
$1.5 trillion just sitting there waiting to be spent.
It was an era of overwhelmingly plentiful, almost reckless capital.
Yeah.
These investment firms and wealthy families were under immense pressure to find targets to put their money into because cash sitting in a bank account isn't generating a massive return.
Right. It's just losing to inflation.
Exactly. So when you have $1.5 trillion burning a collective hole in the market's pocket, and you pair that immense financial pressure with a charismatic, Steve Jobs-esque founder who is backed by the likes of George Shultz and Henry Kissinger.
Basic due diligence just completely falls by the wayside.
Completely. The desperate fear of missing out on the next Apple or the next Google completely overrides the standard demand for peer-reviewed medical data.
But here's where the narrative fundamentally shifts. Because, you can hide behind diplomats, and you can hide behind billionaires, and you can hide behind high-priced PR firms.
For a while.
Right? You can dazzle the business world. But the scientific community is a completely different beast. They operate on a different frequency.
They do?
They operate on data. A seasoned pathologist doesn't care who is on your board of directors. If you claim you have revolutionized the laws of biology, the scientific community is going to demand to see the biology.
And that demand for proof brings us to the first real structural cracks in the Theranos facade. The facade started to crumble not from Wall Street, but from academia. In early 2015, the medical community finally started speaking up loudly.
Okay, I'm looking at the notes here. Explain the role of John Ioannidis.
John Ioannidis is a highly respected, deeply credentialed professor at Stanford University, the very institution Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of.
Oh, the irony.
He is an expert in assessing the validity of medical research. In February 2015, he decided he had seen enough of the media hype.
So what did he do?
He wrote a pointed, critical piece in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JMA.
Which is massive.
And it's one of the most prestigious, widely read medical journals in the world. And he pointed out a very simple, devastating, undeniable fact.
Which was?
Despite all the billions of dollars and all the magazine covers, absolutely zero peer-reviewed research from Theranos had ever been published in the medical research literature.
None.
None. Zero.
For a healthcare company valued at $9 billion, that is insane.
It's completely unprecedented.
That is the equivalent of claiming you've invented a revolutionary car that runs entirely on tap water, getting billions of dollars from investors, but refusing to let a single independent mechanic look under the hood to see the engine.
Exactly. It defies the foundational principles of the scientific method. And the scrutiny didn't stop there.
Who else?
A few months later, in May 2015, Professor Eleftherios Diamandis, a prominent researcher from the University of Toronto, formally analyzed the scientific claims Theranos was making regarding their technology.
And what was his verdict?
He concluded publicly that most of the company's claims were, quote, exaggerated. He essentially said the math and the chemistry just did not add up.
So Holmes is suddenly getting intense heat from the actual scientists. People who have dedicated their lives to understanding how blood works are standing up and saying, well, this simply doesn't make sense.
Right.
So how does she respond? Does she finally publish a peer-reviewed paper? No.
Of course not.
She does something so theatrical, so deeply audacious, that I almost had to read the source material twice to believe it.
The VIP tour.
Yes. To counter the scientific skepticism, she invites the sitting vice president of the United States, Joe Biden, to tour the Theranos facility.
It was a calculated, high-stakes attempt to instantly, artificially inflate the company's credibility.
I mean, it's a PR masterstroke in theory.
In theory, yes. If the vice president of the United States physically tours your laboratory, surrounds himself with your machines, and praises your company on national television, that powerful visual imagery completely drowns out a few academic professors complaining about peer review in medical journals.
Right. The public sees the vice president and they assume the government has vetted the technology. But there was a catch. And this is the part that just fundamentally blows my mind. Because they knew their technology didn't work. They knew their lab was a mess.
So what did they do?
Elizabeth Holmes and her chief operating officer, Sunny Balwani, literally built a fake laboratory just to conceal the true operating conditions from Vice President Biden.
They created an entirely staged Potemkin Village environment specifically for the vice president's tour.
I just need to sit with the physical logistics of that for a second. We talk a lot about Silicon Valley culture, right? Fake it till you make it.
Sure.
We all accept a certain level of exaggeration in tech. You launch a new software app, it has a few bugs, it crashes occasionally, and you patch it later. That is fake it till you make it.
Right, that's normal software dev.
But physically constructing a Hollywood movie set of a medical laboratory, hiding the real failing machines, tricking the Secret Service and the executive branch of the federal government into endorsing non-functional blood testing equipment that will be used on real human beings.
It's staggering.
That isn't startup optimism. That is a whole new universe of pathological deception.
It definitively crosses the line from aggressive marketing into calculated theatrical fraud.
Yeah.
They weren't just lying to investors anymore. They were choreographing a lie for the highest levels of the U.S. government.
It's wild.
But that level of theater, with so many employees involved, simply couldn't last forever. The truth was too explosive to contain.
Enter the Wall Street Journal?
Yes. Because in October 2015, investigative journalist John Carreyrou at the Wall Street Journal dropped a bombshell report that shattered the illusion permanently.
This is the absolute turning point in the timeline. What exactly did Carreyrou uncover that the billionaires and the diplomats miss?
Carreyrou's reporting pierced the veil of secrecy. He revealed that Theranos wasn't actually using their proprietary Edison devices for the vast majority of their blood tests.
Wait, if they weren't using the magical Edison machines, how were they giving patients their results?
They were secretly using traditional, commercially available blood testing machines manufactured by other established companies, like Siemens.
Are you serious?
Yes. They were buying standard lab equipment, putting it behind a curtain, and running the tests the old-fashioned way.
Oh my God.
And furthermore, Carreyrou reported that on the rare occasions they did use the Edison machines for a small subset of tests, those machines might be providing highly inaccurate, dangerous results.
So the entire premise of the company, the core idea that the Edison was this magical, revolutionary box replacing giant traditional labs, was a complete fabrication.
Completely.
They were literally just running a standard traditional lab in secret and apparently doing a terrible job of it. But how did Carreyrou, a journalist, find this out when the investors couldn't?
Through the immense bravery of a key whistleblower named Tyler Schultz.
Okay, Tyler Schultz.
Tyler was a young Theranos employee who worked there from 2013 to 2014. He saw the deception firsthand. He saw the fake results.
And the last name Schultz is absolutely not a coincidence here, is it?
No, it is not. Tyler Schultz is the grandson of George P. Schultz, the former U.S. Secretary of State and one of the most crucial, high-profile directors on the Theranos board.
Oh, wow.
This raises an important question about human psychology and moral courage.
I mean, imagine for a moment, being Tyler Schultz, you are a young guy just starting your career. Your own grandfather, a legendary figure in American history, is on the board of this company and deeply believes in the founder, and you discover it's all a lie.
It is an agonizing, almost impossible position to be in. The pressure to stay quiet must have been immense.
I can't even imagine.
Tyler initially attempted to do the right thing internally. He took his concerns about the data manipulation directly to company management.
And how did that go?
When he was aggressively shut down and told he didn't understand the big picture, he didn't just walk away and keep his mouth shut. He spoke to John Carreyrou at the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
But he went even further than that. He did formal legal action.
What did he do?
Using an alias to protect himself, Tyler Schultz officially reported Theranos to the New York State Department of Health, alerting them to severe clinical laboratory violations.
He risked everything.
Everything.
He risked his nascent career in the biotech industry. He risked his legal and financial safety against a company with billions of dollars. And he risked permanently destroying his personal relationship with his own incredibly powerful grandfather, all to blow the whistle on a medical hazard. That is profound.
And Theranos' corporate response to the Wall Street Journal article was incredibly brutal and swift.
Naturally.
They immediately went on the offensive. They publicly claimed the allegations were factually and scientifically erroneous.
Of course they did.
But behind the scenes, they deployed high-powered, incredibly expensive lawyers to relentlessly hunt down the sources in the story. They specifically targeted Tyler Schultz, threatening him with ruinous litigation, trying to silence him through sheer legal terror.
And it wasn't just lawyers. The source material notes a fascinating, desperate detail.
What's that?
Former employees of a reputation management firm called Status Labs stated that Theranos actively hired them to discreetly erase mentions of the Wall Street Journal's reporting from their Wikipedia article.
Wow. Actively scrubbing the internet.
Which, by the way, is a direct, flagrant violation of the website's terms of use regarding undisclosed paid advocacy. They were trying to literally rewrite their own history in real time, scrubbing the internet to hide the truth from investors who might be Googling them.
It was a desperate attempt to control a narrative that had already escaped their grasp, because the Wall Street Journal story had irrevocably broken the dam.
Right.
Following that explosive report, Walgreens immediately suspended their plans to expand the blood testing centers in their retail stores. The retail partners are spooked.
Obviously.
But much more importantly, the history of Theranos' interactions with federal regulators suddenly came under a glaring, unforgiving microscope.
Which brings us to the inevitable collapse. Because you can hire vicious lawyers to scare a 20-something whistleblower. You can hire shady PR firms to scrub Wikipedia articles. You can lie to journalists. But you absolutely cannot hide from federal health inspectors who arrive unannounced, demanding to look at raw patient safety data.
You cannot. And the regulatory hammer came down with devastating force.
Let's talk about the FDA.
The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, started deeply scrutinizing their operations. And a critical discrepancy was quickly revealed regarding the classification of the nanotainer.
That tiny half-inch blood collection tube we discussed earlier.
Exactly. It was revealed that the FDA had classified the nanotainer as an uncleared Class II medical device.
Let's break that down for the listener. What does that actually mean, practically speaking? What is the difference between a Class I and a Class II medical device?
It comes down to the regulatory philosophy of risk. A Class I medical device is considered very low risk to the patient. Think of a standard toothbrush or a basic Band-Aid.
Okay, simple stuff.
Because the risk of injury is so low, they are subject to far fewer regulatory requirements. Theranos had brazenly asserted to everyone that their nanotainer was a simple Class I device requiring minimal oversight.
Of course they did.
But the FDA, looking at how it was actually being used to draw and store blood for complex diagnostics, determined it was absolutely a Class II device.
And Class II requires a lot more.
Yes. Class 2 devices carry moderate to high risk, which means they legally require special labeling, strict performance standards, and mandatory post-market surveillance to ensure they don't harm patients.
They were pretending a critical piece of diagnostic hardware was as harmless as a Band-Aid to avoid proving it worked.
Exactly. And the findings were damning. The FDA inspection reports from 2014 and 2015 explicitly stated that the nanotainers were, quote, not validated under actual or simulated use conditions.
Wait, so they had never actually proven in a controlled setting that the tiny container worked the way it would be used in the real world on real patients?
That is correct. They deployed a medical device without validating its real-world efficacy.
That is terrifying.
And it gets significantly worse. In January 2016, another federal agency stepped in, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS.
Right.
Following a rigorous inspection of Theranos' primary laboratory in Newark, California, CMS sent a formal letter to the company. The agency stated unequivocally that the facility caused immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety.
Immediate jeopardy. If you are in the healthcare field, that is the most terrifying, apocalyptic phrase you can possibly hear from a federal regulator.
It is the absolute worst.
It means you aren't just making administrative errors. It means you are actively endangering human lives right this second. And this wasn't just a general abstract warning about messy paperwork, right? The source material specifically highlights a catastrophic failure regarding a test for a drug called warfarin.
Yes. Warfarin is a widely used, highly potent blood-thinning medication.
Right.
And the failure of this specific test perfectly highlights the profound, lethal medical danger of Theranos' deception.
I really want to dive deeply into this exact point for a second because I think it's so easy to get lost in the dizzying numbers.
The billions of dollars.
Right. The $9 billion valuations, the $350 million Safeway deals, the famous politicians on the board, and completely forget what was actually at stake on the ground.
Real patients.
Yeah. If you are using a new social media app on your phone and it crashes, what happens? You are annoyed for 3 seconds and you reboot the app. If a software platform has a bug, you refresh the page. Nobody gets hurt.
Exactly.
But warfarin is a critical medication prescribed to patients to prevent deadly blood clots. It requires extremely precise, constant dosage monitoring because the margin for error is razor thin. What happens to a real human patient if a Theranos blood test for a blood thinner comes back wildly inaccurate?
The physiological consequences can be instantly fatal. Let's walk through the clinical reality. If the Theranos Edison machine inaccurately reports that a patient's blood is too thick and prone to clotting, the patient's doctor will look at those results and logically increase their daily dose of warfarin.
Because they trust the lab.
Because they trust the lab. But if that patient's blood was actually already at the correct, safe consistency, that unnecessary extra medication will thin their blood to a dangerous degree.
Oh, no.
If that happens, the patient could suffer a massive hemorrhage. They could literally bleed to death internally from a minor bump on the leg or a small cut.
Good God.
And the converse is equally terrifying.
What happens then?
If the Theranos test inaccurately reports that the patient's blood is too thin, the doctor will immediately lower their dose of warfarin to prevent bleeding.
Right.
But if the test was wrong, and the patient's blood is actually thick and sluggish, taking away that medication puts them at an immediate, extremely high risk for developing a massive life-ending blood clot or suffering a debilitating stroke.
It's literally a matter of life and death. It's not a cute Silicon Valley tech glitch. It's not a software bug. It is a loaded weapon pointed directly at the patient's vital organs.
The federal regulators fully understood the gravity of the situation. Following these horrifying revelations, the unraveling of the company was rapid, complete, and catastrophic.
They shut them down.
By May 2016, under immense regulatory pressure, Theranos was forced to take an unprecedented step.
Yeah.
They voided 2 entire years of test results generated from its Edison devices.
2 entire years of medical data completely thrown out.
Yes.
Imagine being a patient who made life-altering health decisions, dosage changes, or surgical choices based on 2 years of tests that were essentially random number generators.
The liability was astronomical. In June 2016, realizing they had been duped, Walgreens fully and publicly terminated its partnership with Theranos.
Cut ties completely.
They shut down all the in-store clinics, and then they sued Theranos, originally seeking $140 million in damages for breach of contract, though they later settled for less than $30 million.
But here's the crazy part. Even as the ship is completely sinking, even as the FDA and CMS are shutting them down and Walgreens is suing them, Holmes tries to pivot.
She doesn't stop.
In August 2016, Theranos shows up at a prestigious medical conference, the American Association for Clinical Chemistry. They get on stage and present a brand new robotic machine they called the Mini Lab.
Unbelievable.
They try to act like the Edison never happened and present this new box as the future. But yet again, during the presentation, they fail to provide any actual independently verified data supporting the new device's capabilities.
Proving conclusively that the leadership hadn't learned the fundamental non-negotiable lesson of the medical sciences. In medicine, claims without data are entirely meaningless.
You can't fake it.
You cannot market your way out of biology. And without the trust of the medical community, the backing of federal regulators, or the distribution network of their retail partners, the business effectively died.
Yeah, the inevitable mass layoffs began.
They let go of 340 workers, permanently shutting down their clinical labs and wellness centers. And then, a few months later, as the cash dwindled, they laid off another 155 people.
The business is functionally dead. The labs are closed. But the legal and financial fallout is just getting started. And there is a bizarre, deeply cynical twist near the very end of this company's life that I absolutely need you to explain to me.
Okay.
Because it involves a financial maneuver that feels almost entirely disconnected from human morality or physical reality.
You're referring to the December 2017 loan.
Yes. Let me set the stage. It is late 2017. Theranos is bleeding out. They are facing massive lawsuits. They are on the verge of total bankruptcy. The federal government has declared them a danger to patients. And the entire world knows the underlying technology is a complete fraud.
Right. Everyone knows.
And yet, amidst all of this, Fortress Investment Group, which is an investment management company owned by the massive conglomerate SoftBank, steps in and loans Theranos $100 million.
Yes, they do.
Why on earth would any sane financial institution loan a proven fraudulent dying company $100 million at that point?
Because the loan wasn't based on the belief that Theranos would suddenly build a working machine and become profitable.
Then what was it based on?
The loan was entirely secured by Theranos' portfolio of patents.
Wait, the patents?
And this leads to an incredibly cynical, almost unbelievable sequence of events that highlights the dark side of intellectual property law.
Explain this mechanism to me. How does this work?
Theranos, out of cash and options, eventually laid off almost everyone and formally dissolved operations in September 2018. Any equity investments, all those hundreds of millions of dollars from the Walton family, Rupert Murdoch, Betsy DeVos, were rendered completely, irrevocably worthless.
They lost everything.
Over $600 million in investments. Gone. But that specific $100 million loan from Fortress was legally secured by the patents as collateral. So when Theranos officially liquidates, Fortress Investment Group legally takes possession of the entire Theranos patent portfolio.
Okay, let me make sure I am following this. A hedge fund takes ownership of the patents for the fake, non-functional technology that never actually worked.
Exactly. They own the legal rights to the ideas that Theranos wrote down on paper. And then, the story takes its darkest turn.
It gets worse.
A few years later, the COVID-19 pandemic sweeps the globe. Fortress takes advantage of the market conditions and the desperate need for diagnostics. They set up a shell company called Labrador Diagnostics.
Oh, I see where this is going.
And using those newly acquired Theranos patents, the patents from a fraudulent company, this shell company begins aggressively suing actual legitimate medical companies that were manufacturing rapid COVID-19 tests.
You're kidding.
Claiming that those life-saving functional COVID tests violated the vague ideas outlined in the old Theranos patents.
I am honestly struggling to process this. How is it logically or legally permissible that a company definitively proven to be a massive systemic fraud, a company that faked its lab results, lied to the vice president, endangered patients with fake blood thinner results, and lied to investors? How can that company have its patents bought up by a hedge fund shell company, and those exact same patents are then used as a legal weapon to extract money from actual working medical companies that are trying to save human lives during a global viral pandemic?
It is a jarring reality, but it highlights a deep systemic flaw in how intellectual property is treated in the corporate world. Patents are often treated as abstract financial assets, completely divorced from the practical reality of whether the underlying technology actually functions.
That's insane.
The U.S. patent system grants a legal monopoly on an idea, a concept, or a process. It does not necessarily require that the inventor has successfully, safely, or ethically manifested that idea in the real world.
So it's just a weapon.
A piece of paper asserting an idea can be wielded as a legal club, regardless of the fraud surrounding its creation.
It is the ultimate sickening irony of this entire saga. The only time Theranos' technology ever successfully generated actual enforceable revenue was from a cynical lawsuit filed by a shell company years after Theranos itself was dead and buried.
It is a grim postscript. But meanwhile, the human consequences for the founders who orchestrated the deception were finally, inevitably materializing.
Right, they didn't get away with it.
In March 2018, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, formally filed civil fraud charges, describing Theranos' operations as an elaborate, years-long fraud. And that was just the beginning. Then the federal prosecutors stepped in.
The criminal reckoning finally arrives.
Yes. Elizabeth Holmes and her former partner and COO, Sunny Balwani, were federally indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. In their indictment, the prosecutors explicitly noted that they deliberately, knowingly deceived investors, doctors, and vulnerable patients. The government argued that Holmes and Balwani were completely aware of the unreliability, the inaccuracy, and the sheer danger of their products, and yet they actively, continuously concealed that critical information to keep the money flowing.
And they didn't go down quietly, did they? They didn't just accept responsibility. The source material outlined some pretty severe allegations regarding the final days of the company.
They definitely did.
In February 2021, federal prosecutors formally accused Holmes and other top executives of actively destroying vital evidence during Theranos' chaotic final days.
Yeah.
Specifically, they were accused of destroying the internal testing databases, the very history that showed the actual accuracy and catastrophic failure rates of their Edison systems. They allegedly tried to burn the data before the government could analyze it.
A classic hallmark of consciousness of guilt. And in the end, a jury of her peers looked at all the evidence, the fake labs, the altered reports, and the ruined patients, and found Elizabeth Holmes guilty on 4 counts of defrauding investors.
And the sentence.
In November 2022, she was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison, officially reporting to a federal prison camp in Texas in May of 2023.
Wow. And Balwani.
Sunny Balwani faced his own trial, was convicted on all 12 counts brought against him, and was sentenced to an even harsher 12 years and 11 months behind bars.
A spectacular, devastating collapse from a $9 billion valuation in magazine covers to over a decade in federal prison.
Yes.
And it left this massive, undeniable cultural crater behind. It birthed investigative journalist John Carreyrou's incredible, definitive book on the subject, Bad Blood. It inspired the HBO documentary The Inventor and the wildly popular Hulu miniseries The Dropout, where Amanda Seyfried played Holmes.
He is everywhere.
The source even notes a fascinating Hollywood detail. Before the miniseries was ever made, Academy Award winner Jennifer Lawrence was attached to star in a film version. She was actually deep into pre-production, working extensively on learning Holmes's distinct, highly unusual speech pattern before eventually stepping away from the project.
The story became a massive cultural touchstone because it perfectly, tragically encapsulates the dark side of a modern mythology. It forces us to confront the reality of the narratives we worship in business.
So what does this all mean for us? We've walked through the 2003 founding, the impossible patents, the fake labs built for politicians, the terrifying immediate jeopardy warnings regarding blood thinners, the cynical patent lawsuits, and finally, the prison sentences.
We've covered a lot.
If you are listening to this, you are interacting with tech startups, health apps, and medical innovations all the time. The core lesson here seems to be that Silicon Valley's prevailing, celebrated ethos, the idea that you should move fast and break things, that you should launch the beta version and fix it later, well, that is fundamentally structurally incompatible with human biology.
That is the essential, unavoidable takeaway of the Theranos tragedy.
Right.
When a new social media app crashes or a photo-sharing website goes down, you reboot your phone. Nobody is harmed.
Right.
When a software update has a hidden bug, a developer works overnight and writes a digital patch. But when a diagnostic blood test fails, when it erroneously tells a terrified patient their blood is too thick when it isn't, or tells them they don't have a disease when they actually do, you can't just write a software patch.
You can't.
Someone might suffer a stroke. Someone might be given the wrong medication. Someone might die. The stakes in biology are absolute.
We have to demand proof over personality.
Exactly. As consumers of healthcare, as potential investors, and most importantly, as patients, we have to train ourselves to look past the impressive board members.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who's on the letterhead.
It simply does not matter if a former Secretary of State is vouching for the company. It doesn't matter if the wealthiest billionaires on earth are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into it. The only question that matters when assessing medical technology is, where is the peer-reviewed data? Where is the independently verified science?
It's a story that forces us to look in the mirror and ask why we wanted to believe the magic trick so badly that we willingly ignored the thick black wires holding the illusion up.
The intense desire for disruption, the hunger for a visionary genius to solve complex problems effortlessly, it completely blinded the establishment to the glaring absence of basic science.
I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought from the source material that really rattled me as I was preparing for this. We talked earlier about how broken the patent system can be, with that shell company suing legitimate COVID test makers. But there is another detail buried in the timeline.
Okay.
Because the United States patent application process is so incredibly lengthy, so mired in bureaucracy, the federal agency was still issuing new patents to Theranos into the year 2019.
Think deeply about the implications of that timeline.
Into 2019. Well after John Carreyrou and the Wall Street Journal exposed the massive fraud, well after the federal health regulators shut down the laboratories for immediate patient jeopardy,
Yeah.
long after the company was officially dissolved and liquidated and its executives were federally indicted for massive multi-million-dollar wire fraud, the government was still actively rubber stamping and handing them official U.S. patents for their fake technology.
It's unbelievable.
So the next time you hear a startup boast about their massive, impenetrable portfolio of patents, you have to ask yourself, does a piece of paper actually prove an innovation works in the real world? Or does it just prove they knew exactly how to play the system?
A crucial question we should all keep asking.